Hello, this is David Brower. I am welcoming you to episode 6 of the Living Pleasurable Show. I have a very special guest today, Lacou Flipse, pleasure eating coach. And today we're going to be speaking about how to receive pleasure. Pretty cool subject. Thanks for being here, Lacou.
Thanks for having me.
So let me just briefly, and if you want to add to this, Lacou, share a little bit about Lacou and some of the things that she stands for, which I think will give us a little bit of a lens and a frame and a playground for this conversation. She's the founder of Enlightened Munch. She's the creator of the pleasure eating process. She's a lot about eating for pleasure, which of course I'm holding up my hand for this one. She's about tuning into your authentic food rhythm. Want to hear about that? That's pretty cool. And you also have said some really beautiful things and posted a lot of things about dieting being something that doesn't really work. And you can share more about this. We can talk about this. And also kind of the idea that nutritional info itself doesn't necessarily work. Movement is medicine. Love that. And a couple quotes here, if I may, from things that you posted. Food is an offering, not a coping tool. I think that's a beautiful thing. A lot about feeling and eating, which is very meaningful. I look forward to discussing around that. And then this quote, I really love this quote. You get to have a relationship with food that feels easeful, pleasurable, and fun. So yeah, with that, let's just jump right into it, Lacou. And thank you for being here. This is so great. Talking about pleasure and food for me, as you can imagine.
Yeah, and we've talked before, and it sounds like like I shared with you before, it's really interesting speaking with you about pleasure eating because you have a whole different perspective because you're in a culture that has a completely different perspective about just pleasure in general. And I think on the topic of receiving pleasure, you might be in a culture that is more allowing has more capacity to receive pleasure. So that's really beautiful.
So why would you say this about, I don't know, are you speaking just about an American?
Yeah, I think in America, we feel there's like this undertone that we have to earn pleasure, almost like we have to earn like money. It's really interesting. I think the wires get crossed. Where there's this like notion that we have to earn pleasure. So for example, in the women that I work with, I'm working to get women into their authentic food rhythm, and in order to do that, they need to be intimate with their body. And intimacy with the body includes being able to experience the pleasure of just like me sitting here on my couch talking to you, like that's an ability to receive pleasure. And so when I get women to attune to their bodies, they'll start feeling all this pleasure and freak out. They'll freak out. And it's because we have like an upper limit of what we're willing to experience in our body. And we also have a lower limit. And so most people live within a very finite range. So I think like in America, we have a very, a lower bar maybe for pleasure and what we're willing to receive, and maybe in France and where you live, since it's so, it seems to be a bit more relaxed and people are more into food and allowing for food to be food and this beautiful experience. Here, it's like food is just fuel to get on to the next thing. It's not really seen as something that's pleasurable. So the bar for receiving pleasure through food, I think, is very low, which is why I think we see a lot of binge eating, because people who binge and emotionally eat, they think they're eating for pleasure, but it's just like this very low bar pleasure. It's not like the pleasure of a 6-course meal and talking with people you really love and enjoying all the flavors and the experiences and the environment and the textures. It's like let me get this in as much as I can, because one, I'm not even allowed to experience pleasure. So let me just like shuffle this all down. Two, I'm going to feel bad about this afterwards. And then that's going to cause me to repeat the cycle of just not allowing myself to experience pleasure.
Yeah. So what is, this is great stuff. What is it that is that why people are feeling that they can't allow themselves to experience pleasure? I mean, this whole earning it thing, and can you speak a little bit more about that? I mean, why can't we experience pleasure? Why can't we receive pleasure?
I think it has to do with this notion. I think pleasure is, in my world, pleasure is it's basically our authenticity, which is kind of our birthright. It's a way of being that makes living more pleasurable, makes living more enjoyable. Like it's recognizing that there's pleasure in even like our most painful moments. Like, you know, the insights you get from heartbreak, for one thing. And I think having it's an orientation, I think, to the world. And I think the reason why it's hard to orient this way is because I think there's this notion that we need to earn pleasure, and pleasure, I think, is very closely connected to worthiness. Am I worthy of receiving pleasure? Am I worthy of receiving the things I want? And if we don't believe that we are, and I think worthiness is something that is inherent, and as humans, we kind of believe that we need to earn it because of unconditional love received in childhood. And there's this like game we play with ourselves where we're like, okay, I need to earn love. And it becomes this like game because we already love, you know, like we're already worthy of everything. And so we play this game and it becomes impossible to win because the bar keeps getting higher and higher. And so this is when I had an experience like this where in my business, I was like, I think it was my first year making a profit in my business. And I was just like on cloud 9 for 5 seconds. And then I was like looking around, wondering, what's next? So even though I had everything I wanted, I still felt I wasn't able to receive the pleasure of that moment because my searching for worthiness was outside. And so the bar needed to be put on another pedestal because the orientation is to search for it outside instead of recognizing that it's created within me. So I think most people don't know that. And that's why they don't allow themselves to receive and experience pleasure.
Yeah, fascinating. And I've always felt that, and this is perhaps me projecting, but that, you know, we fall into hedonic adaptations. So this sort of mental activity that makes us make things normal very quickly. And so we just consider it like it's, you know, it's nothing special, when perhaps we've accomplished something, we've achieved something that's really quite extraordinary or really great for us. And I always ask myself, how can I savor this achievement, this moment, this, you know, how can I turn and look back and say, wait a minute, let's celebrate instead of saying, what's next? You know, I'll remember I'll tell a very quick story with and this is a 2-year-old or 5-year-old or something kid when I was with a very close friend of mine in the UK. And it was, there were 2 kids actually with 2 different parents, and the kids were cousins. And the little girl got a present in front of the other kid, and she opened it up. And the first thing she said after she smiled for 1 second was she looked up to her parents and she said, "What else?" And I was like, and her parents were like looking every which direction, you know. And I feel like we've brought this into the rest of our lives. I mean, can we savor and receive the pleasure and value it and give it more weight and give it more meaning and more perspective by choosing. And for me, this is where it joins the inside game to say, well, wait a minute, this is pretty amazing. This can happen when you're eating. You go and have a great meal, and like as the dishes are coming through, et cetera, like if you're not talking about it and expressing it and using all your senses and noticing and savoring and expressing what you're experiencing, your unique take, maybe you don't like it, they like it, doesn't matter. But like, can you say multiple things? Can you express how you feel about it? Like you actually make it memorable. You actually make the moment where you're present to it. Instead of it just being like, as I hate these expressions, like filling your tank. Like, no, I'm full. I'm like, get rid of that expression. You're satiated. You've enjoyed your meal.
Yeah, because fullness can mean like that your belly is rock hard because you've eaten 6 pizzas. Satiation happens a lot sooner than that.
Satiation, satisfaction, these types of things definitely happen a lot sooner. And I often wonder, and let me ask you this question, like so many people say they love to eat. And I know a lot of people who say that, and I'm like, this is, again, I'm like projecting or I'm subjective, and I'm saying, I'm like, really? Like this whole idea of being a foodie or an Epicurean, or like in every other area of life, maybe you're an aficionado of art or cars or cinema or something. Why not with food? Some people maybe have a more educated palate, and so they have a more sophisticated, nuanced, distinction-oriented way of experiencing something. And, when they're with somebody who maybe hasn't had this range of experience, this variety, this quality, and both of them say they love to eat, I get really confused. So how do you reconcile that? I don't want to, like, last thing I want to be is like the French snob around food, right?
Oh my gosh, you totally sound like I love it though. I'm so tickled by it. I'm just like, give me more. I want to up level my palate, because I know my palate. My palate is like, I would say it's refined for certain things, but it's probably not on your level. But yeah, not at all.
Well, but does that mean that you love eating less than I do?
No, I think both those
No,
people.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I think it's just like the sommelier. I love red wine, but it's going to be a different experience for a sommelier, and those two people that you compared can love food equally. It's just like one has a different perspective to love food, and the other one has a different perspective. They both love it. In my world, I get people who binge, overeat, emotionally eat past comfort, who are like, I can't stop because I love food. And that I don't think is actually love, because you're abusing your body, which is not love, and you're abusing food. So I think the wires get crossed again there. But I think what you're talking about is like two different people who love food at different, at their capacity to receive pleasure from food. And I think in my world, it's kind of manipulated in a way where people use their love for food as an excuse to condone bad behavior, self-abusive food behavior.
Yeah. So I often wonder about this also, and you know way more about this than I do, Lacou, but like I've created this story in my head that as you increase the quality of your palate, and how do you do this? You're more present to what you eat. And so as you're more present, you can eat stuff that's not so good. And you're also way more present to how much you're eating. And of course, portion control is a whole nother subject. But as you're more present to it, you start to appreciate more, you start to value more, and you start to actually nourish yourself more from less, because you start to notice more, you start to kind of realize how you're nourishing yourself. I think little by little, we start to improve our palate because of the sensorial presence that we bring to the moment. We suddenly are saying to ourselves, like this, I don't know, this industrial mayonnaise is really shitty. Why am I eating this mayonnaise? Or why am I putting 4 sugars into my coffee? Right? Like, so you start to, because you become present to it, you start to realize really what you're experiencing through a very material sensory, sensorial experience. And I want to believe that by being more attentive, being more present to what you're experiencing, you start to kind of realize that you're nourishing yourself either in quantity or quality that's not how you really want to love yourself or, take care of yourself. And I just wonder if people, are people able to do this? Are people, to kind of get beyond the emotional side of things by using really a presence and a sensory way of starting to make different choices and starting to educate? Because you're present, you educate your palate. And this is really what it's about. And we could talk about cooking, but the more you educate your palate, I think the better choices you make and the more agency you have. And is this kind of a shortcut to overcome some of this, or am I completely delusional?
No, you're like basically describing the pleasure eating process, because what you're talking about is like awakening the palate, and I talk about it in the sense that we awaken the body.
Yeah.
Get back into the body. We eat with our whole body instead of just like our mind. It is like an awakening. It's like, oh, my body says that maybe 2 slices of pizza is good enough for me, and I don't need to eat 6 whole pizzas. And that does come, I would say, like, I have a quote that's feel your feelings so that you can eat for pleasure. And so I think like the emotional stuff needs to come first so that you are present with food.
What do you mean by that?
If someone is eating for emotional reasons, or, if someone's eating for emotions, if they're eating as a result of being triggered or in a high activated state, as much as they try, they're not going to be able to eat for pleasure because the body is in fight or flight. So it's not here. You're not here. You're in your head, you're dissociated, you're fawning, you're having a trauma response. And so in order for someone to like drop in and be able to experience the pizza they're eating, in order to like really taste it, because our digestive system shuts down, we don't really taste that much. And the goal isn't to enjoy when you're triggered or in a high stress state. It's to calm yourself, because there is like a calming effect of eating when you're highly triggered. It's not like a really great tool to utilize, but there's a reason, like physiologically, why people move towards food when they're like highly just like in experiencing a lot of feelings. So I think it's important to clear the feelings first, and then get to a pleasurable state in your body. And then you can open up to receive more pleasure, because your physiology and your nervous system is primed for it. But I think we have to be able to receive that, right? And get into a receiving mode where your arms are like wide open and you can experience pleasure. I had a client who thought that Domino's pizza was she thought it was great. And then she got into her body and was like, wow, this is actually really gross. And I like this. She now likes this really like thin crust pizza. It's just, I don't know, like very bougie pizza compared to Domino's. And she ate far less of it.
Sounds like Napolitano pizza, very thin, supple.
Yeah, it's just like, it sounds to me like she's aligned her desire for pizza to her authentic food rhythm, because the Domino's was just a reaction or response based off of her feelings. But once she got to a place of pleasure in her body, she was able to be aware and awake to what she actually wanted to experience.
That's fascinating. And really the association between quality and quantity is a really kind of a big thing. 'Cause I really, again, believe in, again, you know so much more about this than I do. As you eat more qualitatively, you don't necessarily need to eat as much quantity wise. You know, 4 or 5 pizzas, my gosh. And just think about it like money wise, or like, what if you bought one that you were super present to and like it served even this emotional service, but you're eating just one qualitative, like, you know, off the charts, like it's so good you can't even like, I can't even talk to somebody, right? It's like so good, versus the domino thing where you eat 6 of it in a row and you're kind of, I don't know where you are. And I guess this is what you're helping people to pattern break this and to see this differently. And I think that's really, really magical. And I would hope that people find and create for themselves other options, right? So they can either cook for themselves, or like they know where to go eat good pizza to go and kind of, you know, okay, let me just go here and try one and be present. And let's see how that goes. Maybe they have 2, but not 5. You know what I mean? Like, but maybe
Yeah. Yeah, what you're describing is like how people go from binge eating to aligning to their authentic food rhythm. And it takes like that practice and that repetition to kind of know. Some people are like, oh, once they tap in, they know and they're able to trust that. And some people need like that kind of like that feedback loop of trying something, see what the feedback is, no, moving on and trying something else.
so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful process.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, the relationship with food, you know, food, and I would even say drinking is, you know, this whole idea about being our first medicine also is huge. You know, particularly with the way things are made today. So, like cultivating even a taste for something that's more like that is self-love and self-nurturing and self-health kind of 101. But let's transition and talk about dieting, because I know you also have some thoughts about that. And you know, this kind of dieting doesn't work, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what you've said, but I think I read something like that. I have some very strong opinions about that. And again, you know, I'm not, who am I, right? But I do believe that what we want to seek for is some sort of a lifestyle versus some kind of temporary Band-Aid, you know, kind of like crazy up and down thing that's more kind of a gentle curve from kind of maybe excess to a little bit, you know, getting back to our regular rhythms. And so could you speak a little more to that?
Yeah. So I don't find that diets work. I mean, when I was binge eating, I tried every diet under the sun and I was like, this one's gonna fix me. And nothing ever worked because I was looking at the wrong direction. I was looking for something external, again, abandoning my body for some external entity to tell me how to eat and heal myself. But really, like what you're saying, it's like there needs to be like a tuning in to um, get intimate with what sensations I want to experience. And I wasn't doing that when I was going on the juice fast or different diets I was trying. So diets don't work long term because it's external in. And so what works is shifting the internal so that you gravitate towards foods that are in alignment with your authenticity. Diets don't give you an opportunity to align with your authenticity. What it does is it trains you to align with like what someone else has prescribed for you to eat. And eventually your body's going to reject that. And that's when people go on this like yo-yo thing where the body's like, well, I'm done with this. Let's go back to binge eating, because you never really solved the problem, which is the pattern of abandoning the body. You actually use something else to abandon your body. So of course you're going to go back to abandoning the body with food. So that's why it doesn't work. It's a way of abandoning the body in my world.
There's a
And when
great,
oh,
yeah, no,
our,
go
I
ahead.
just wanted to clarify what abandoning the body means, because I know that that can be
Yeah.
confusing for some people. Abandoning the body is basically leaving your system to prioritize an external entity. So we do this with diets. We do this when we feel big emotions. We prioritize food over feeling those feelings.
Mm,
This can also happen in like relationships where you're prioritizing someone else's needs over your own,
mm,
which brings us back to that binge behavior to compensate. So any type of self-abandonment, it kind of perpetuates more. So the pattern is the key is to heal the pattern, not the not the food really. Like the problem isn't really the food, it's like the pattern. So since diets are focused on food, doesn't really work.
I've always been fascinated. Every year in the States, there's the US News and World Report, number 1 to 50 diets. And like the last, I don't know how many years, in the top 1, 2, 3 is almost always the Mediterranean diet.
Oh.
And this is basically how I eat. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. It doesn't have anything to do with dieting. It's how you eat, it's what you mix with what you eat. It's about portions, about lots of vegetables and seafood and olive oil and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But it's not like a, thing that you do for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks. It's like, no, you actually start to live that way. And I feel that you're supporting people to actually find their way of like, what's their Mediterranean diet that works for them. And that is not overly, like an emotional kind of blocker and satiator. Because I kind of agree with you, because like eating and drinking at some level, we all come back from work at the end of the day. We're with loved ones. We want to have a gorgeous meal, or we go out or something. And like it is a bit of a, it is satiating and it is satisfying, but it's probably also kind of calming, right? It's also kind of like soothing, kind of like, particularly if you're really present to the food and you're not going having 6 pizzas, right? You're going to some place that maybe you choose or that you love, or it's like, and you're with people that you love and you're actually sharing in a loving moment, and you're kind of, these things that you're talking about, like these emotional things, you're kind of releasing, you're able to kind of both get the pleasure of eating and get the pleasure of kind of releasing. And I think ideally in my world, like you're using these moments to actually heal yourself. And at the same time, it's super pleasurable because you're eating something that's really delicious.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is like more of like an advanced practice that I teach people, which is like initially I don't really support people using food to cope or de-stress or anything, but I think like once you've gotten into your body, you can have discernment, right? But someone who's addicted to food and who needs it and has like this compulsion, it's hard for them to really have that discernment without like self-deception coming in, because that's what we do when we're addicted to anything. We'll justify getting that, using that substance. So yeah, like if you don't have a problem with food, like by all means use food to cope, because what you're saying, it's like, it sounds like it's a part of your life. I think it would be harmful if you had a job that you hated, you came home every night and you're like, my only way of existing in this world is to drown my sorrows in wine and avoiding actually handling the situation at my job, setting boundaries, leaving that job, or doing something that will actually heal your life. If someone's using food or drinking to cope with a difficult situation that they can actually get out of, then I don't think it's helpful. And I think that's where discernment comes in. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's so meaningful. How do you help people with this completely unregulated portion size thing that happens in America. I mean, how can you possibly have an XXXL soda, or like the all you can drink, all you can eat, like multiple sizes of coffees, and like not only coffee, but you can also add multiple sugars and syrups, and like there's too much choice, right? There's almost too much freedom, really, for certain people. I feel we're not really helping people to canalize. And I'll give you one example, which I really appreciate when I first came to France 30 years ago. That's changed a bit this year in France, but when I first came, it was like there's a breakfast hour, there's a lunchtime, and there's a dinner time. And in between these times, like you can't find a place to go eat. I mean, literally, that the kitchens are not open, right? And it's like incredibly, it helps you to like create a system and a pattern and a routine. And of course, the digestive system likes eating at the same time, kind of like this regularity. It knows what to expect. It's waiting for that. And so it's not like on this random electron thing. And, it was unbelievably useful. And then we jumped to the American model where 24/7, unlimited sizes, not just one size. Like, how do people navigate that when they're struggling with that? It's like, I feel like we're not helping people.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, think about our phones. Instagram, Facebook, they're not really designed to help us. Of course you can use it consciously, but it's not designed to be consciously used. It's designed to be addictive. And so things like double XL burgers, lots of sugar in foods, they're designed specifically to create a habit. They're not designed for the interest of people eating them. And so I think how I deal with that in my work is when people get into their bodies, they're able to develop enough intimacy and discernment where they don't have, their standards are higher. So they don't even really interact with those paradigms anymore, because that's like a different paradigm of relating and orienting to the world, to where you can be unconscious enough with your relationship with food where you succumb to that. But I think like when someone's intimate enough with their body, it's just like, now they get to a point where they're just like, I see that and it just doesn't appeal. For example, with myself, I grew up eating McDonald's, and it's so strange. I haven't eaten McDonald's since I was like, I don't know, a kid, but I still have there's something in me that has created a marker for McDonald's French fries. Like every time I smell it, I'm like, why is my mouth watering? I don't want that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just something in it. These foods are designed to be addicting and to create lifelong customers. So yeah, that's why I think it's really important to have like a very conscious and intimate connection with your body, so that you can kind of see through all the BS out there. Because it's hard out here in America. It's definitely not designed for health the way our food system is. It's designed, to feed into the medical industrial system.
Yeah, and this idea that we are giving everyone free choice and that it's free, but that's not true, because I guess that's true in some ways, but there's unbelievable lobbying and manipulation and all these kinds of things going on in advertising that's not, regulated. So it's not really a fair playing field. We're manipulating kind of constantly people. And I mean, that's probably a whole nother conversation, but so let's transition here, because I know we're getting along in time, and I want to ask you, how do people work with you? Where can we find you? What's new for you? What do you want to share?
Folks can find me on Instagram at Lacou Flipse. And I'm also on Facebook at Enlightened Munch. I also have a free Facebook group that folks can join. It's called The Pleasure Eating Process. And how folks can work with me is I do group programs and where we go really deep into developing your authentic food rhythm that is a reflection of you. And I also do one-on-one for folks who want a more intimate journey with me.
Okay, great. We'll put some links into the different places where this show with you will be aired. So a few other questions here before we wrap up. Is there anything that you don't eat?
Yeah.
For example?
There's like nothing I don't. Well, I don't really like pork, so I don't really eat that. But if I come across like really good cochinita pibil, if I'm in like Mexico in the Yucatan and I'm like, there's cochinita pibil everywhere and it's amazing, I'll eat pork there. Other than that, I don't eat pork. Just because I don't.
Let me ask you about some questions. Do you eat oysters?
I eat oysters, yeah. But obviously it has to be from a really good source.
You eat ceviche?
Ceviche? I don't
Ceviche, raw fish. It's a Mexican, Latin American raw fish with herbs and.
Oh yeah, like poke. Yeah, I eat poke.
Yeah.
In Hawaii, it's called poke.
Yeah. Do you eat tartar, raw meats, red meats?
I have had tartar once. It was a very interesting experience. Like it felt like my body was buzzing afterwards. Like I felt like an animal, like I felt like a wild animal. It was really interesting. I try to stay away from dairy, but I'll have like little, like if I'm eating a cookie and it has dairy in it, I'll, allow that. I have like a threshold for how much dairy I'm willing to tolerate because if I have like too much, I tend to break out and have some GI issues. So I know like if it's just like in a cookie, it's fine.
Even with ewe cheese or goat cheese, you have the same reaction, or?
Goat cheese, I can eat a bit more because there's less of the protein that impacts me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I have had larger amounts of dairy in Montreal. Like that's the only place I've had dairy outside of America. And that didn't really impact me. So maybe they have different ways of dealing with their dairy there.
Lactose intolerant, or?
I don't know. Maybe I
Try
don't think
try ewe cheese. Try ewe cheese. EWE, right? It's brebis in French. Because I have a bit of a lactose intolerance. I've always had it since I was little. I grew up with a mom who was vegetarian in Southern California, and I drank soy milk and rice milk and all these kinds of things, which for a man, soy milk is not such a great thing, but okay. When I came here, I realized after eating 10 years of cheese that the cow cheese stuff was way more, I get kind of and a little bit of a stuffy nose.
Yeah.
But with goat cheese and even more so ewe cheese, there's something about the protein and the sugar or salt or whatever. There's something different there. So I would suggest if you even want to do that, but I eat like ewe cheese yogurt here and like stuff like that. It's kind of completely different. I have a completely different reaction. I don't really have a reaction at all, which is quite amazing. But anyway,
thank you.
Yeah.
I'll check that out because I do occasionally miss cheese. There's some really good alternatives, but
you can find ewe cheese in California, definitely.
Okay, cool.
Ewe cheese. So I'm going to leave you the last words here before we wrap up. I'm going to just first thank you, Lacou, for sharing this moment with me to talk about how to receive pleasure, particularly around food. And I feel like we could go on for another 2 hours.
I know, and like really go down this rabbit hole.
So maybe we'll do another one. But I wanted to just give you a couple minutes to share whatever you want to share to everyone who's going to be watching this about, how to receive pleasure and what you want to share. And then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Thank you for having me. If there's anything I want to share, it would be I would encourage and invite everyone to put their body on the pedestal. Take food, take diet culture, take anti-diet culture off the pedestal and put your food put your body on the pedestal, because too many people, I think, have food on the pedestal or some external entity on the pedestal, and that just creates a lot of problems.
Mm. Beautiful. Powerful.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Thanks for coming, Lacou. Bye, everyone. We'll see you at the next Living Pleasurable Show. Stay tuned. Ciao.